Welcome back to the Uncommon Man podcast, where today you're joined by myself, Harry, and Nick. And in this podcast, we help high-achieving men to reconnect with themselves so they can redefine success on their terms, not just in business, but more importantly, in their relationships and even in their health. And it wouldn't be a final podcast for the year if we didn't take a step back and do a bit of reflection. Take a step back, look at, where we're both at personally, and hopefully a few questions and things that you guys can take away and maybe ask yourself in your reflection of your year, maybe what went well, what didn't go so well, and then most importantly, how you can put those lessons to good use coming into 2025 and make 2025 an even better year than this year. So with that said, Nicholas, on reflection, let's start with the wins, man. I think it's always good to start with the wins. What were some of your highlights of this year?
Probably my biggest win was the birth of my daughter, and I ended up being the doctor and the midwife and the catcher of said baby. So I've recently updated my CV on LinkedIn. That was probably like the biggest highlight for the year was that. I think when I'm looking at it from a professional standpoint, Project Bali was really, really great. We all got to connect there. I think just as a company, as a movement, and just to connect with our clients in a completely different space. And that opened up a lot of dialogues and conversations with where we all wanting to head in terms of the big vision of the Uncommon Man project. Spiritually, if I'm going to be honest, I think it was a year where a lot of the practices over the last decade or so really had to come into play, just to reframe things and see things and look at the lessons behind things, as you mentioned there. And it just tested that will, that grit, and the perspective that I was maybe so fixed within. So I think it was a big eye opener. And from a parenting standpoint, Harry, invested a lot of time in my kids, and genuinely proud of the amount of connection that I've been able to create there. It's probably the best that I've done as a father to date. So I feel a massive improvement there. And relationship had some moments where we had to add some grease to the wheels, the squeaky wheels, but they have been adjusted since. And I listened to my boss.
So no more squeaky wheels?
No more squeaky wheels right now. No, we're good. But all in all, I think just from the big win would be the birth of my daughter, and just overall just feeling like a massive step forward on the personal side, which feels really good. And yourself, what did 2024 bring to your side of the world?
So for me, 2024 has probably been one of the biggest years in terms of forced growth. So obviously in doing what we do, we're always looking towards that personal growth, like trying to be better in all those different areas. But we don't get too many opportunities where it's like, well, you either need to grow or you go back to those old habits and old ways of comfort and kind of getting by. And so in that growth period, there's a certain level of uncertainty, which, especially if you've got a child that you're responsible for, comes a certain level of stress as well as trying to provide that certainty as well. So that's been a challenge to grow into that space, to manage those emotions of stress and that uncertainty. But I guess one of the big wins of 2024 for me is the prioritization of family and setting some of those boundaries. So like it took me a while to be able to recognize that every time I said yes to doing extra tasks or to more work and to doing these things, that it conversely was also saying no to time with like my son and wife, or time that I was doing other things, right? One of the big realizations that I've had recently is, as much as I love working at the yard, doing the face-to-face coaching and things like that, there's a lot of hidden costs that you don't really realize when you first start. And so for me, I've always been a morning person. So getting up early, no dramas, right? Love it. Just maybe if I need to have an extra cup of coffee, then other than that, I'm fine to do that. But then recognizing that if I'm now working in the mornings, that means I don't get to see my son first thing in the morning. So I just see him at nights. To get up early means I need to go to bed early, which means that my time without my son, with just my wife, gets cut down even shorter. And so then that puts a strain on the relationship as well. And then trying to go work back even earlier, then you're trying to have dinner earlier, you've got to organize dinner earlier, you've got to do all these things like earlier, and then that creeps into, well, our kind of time, so early afternoon, and it has a lot of those effects that I guess, well, at least I didn't think about at the time. And so I got a whoop strap the other day because my watch died and I needed a vibration alarm so I can get up in the morning without waking Liv. So of course Whoop was the natural, selection. And within 2 days, it's telling me I need to go to bed at 4 p.m. To get 100% sleep performance. So I'm like, cool, that's going to go down well with Liv. Sorry, I can't even pick our son up from daycare because I'm going to be asleep by then. So there's been a lot of wins, but also realizations this year from that journey.
I think, what you're mentioning there is just something that a lot of guys are going through. From my end, very, very similar. Fortunately, I'm not having to leave the house, but my dance has actually been for having a newborn in the house because it's shifted the entire dynamic because all your focus is on baby. And you've got 2 other kids and you've got a wife. And then from your wife's perspective, well, I've got 2 other kids and I've got a husband. And your kids are like, there's a baby. And what about us? Where's the balance of tension and intention and connection? And that's been one of those things because it both of these scenarios are very real, are very well lived with many men throughout the world. And I think it's just one of those things where recognizing your time poor because of the perspective and the decisions that you're making within that perspective. So it's how do you reframe certain things to the best of your ability, where it's like, well, my relationship isn't necessarily going to end because now we don't get time there. Where can we get time before that? Or where can I allocate it at a different period of time? Or where there's things that we can do congruently together and we can still create that sense of intimacy and connection that we need. I mean, this is the person I want to do life with. And then the little human being or mini me running around also gets to be like, hey, there's my dad. He's alive and kicking. Not every Sunday was dad's burnt out, collapsed, lying there cathartic on the couch and being like, I just want to watch TV and sleep. That's it. So I think it's really one of those big questions around time. How have you been allocating your time throughout the year? Because that's normally the dance between the wins. Because yes, you're going to win in a couple of areas, but you allocated time and intention towards that. That's why the needle moved, because your attention, intention, care, and energy went into that space. Now, what about the other areas? So I actually want to ask you, you've spoken a bit about your wins and the themes that arose from that. What are some of the areas where there was friction and there was tension and there was confusion and there was, what is the next step? Or I honestly dropped the ball in this department.
Well, I guess I led with the wins and those realizations, but it took that friction and that's dropping the ball or kind of getting overloaded at certain points to get to that point of realization, right? It wasn't a realization from a place of comfort exactly. You get to that point where something's got to give. And it's not new to me, and that's probably not a good thing why I can block it out more than I should listen to when people tell me like, oh, you've got too much on your plate. Don't put your limitations on me, fuck off. Right, that's the usual kind of response there. But then being able to listen to that a little bit more, obviously choose who you listen to, but there was times where I was taking on more than I could handle and getting spread too thin, so that even I would work basically right up till the dot that my family would walk through the door. And the problem with that for me was I didn't get to finish my day on my terms, right? So it didn't matter where I was in the task. It could be mid-email, or I could have just been closing the tabs at that point. And so at that point, I would often then be greeting them with frustration and resentment. And I just want to finish this work. Let me finish this job. Just let me finish this email. I just need to get back to this person. I just need to do this thing. Just leave me alone for 5 minutes, right? And they haven't seen me all day. if I was gone in the morning, I haven't seen them since last night, and that's the way I'm greeting them. What the hell is that? And so that was a big shift for me, because then, even though that may have been overall for me a small, part of my day, that was one of the very small interactions that they had with me. And that's not the way that I want them. That's not the version of me that I want them to come home to. I want them to look forward to coming home, to seeing me, and being in that state that's ready to give them my attention, that's present with them, that's not stressed, that's just happy to be here, rather than, well, I'm here reluctantly, I'll do the bare minimum, put everyone to bed, do this, and then I'm going back to work. And it's almost like, you never want your partner and your kids to feel like an inconvenience in your life. Like, that's a pretty shit feeling.
Yeah.
And so that was something that massively had to change for me. And luckily, that's quite an easy fix. Just making sure that, like, I have a hard cutoff time of when I finish my day, so that I've got enough time to do whatever I need to do physically and mentally, so that by the time I either have to go get my son or they come home, that I'm in that state of, cool, I'm present, I'm happy to be here, I'm everything that I need to be for them, and I've got nowhere better to be because I'm with the people that I want to be, rather than the stressed, frustrated person that just wants to get back to work.
And I think we actually have a resource for that, which would be the time audit that you did. That's on the website, and that'll just maybe help frame and direct you to making better decisions, essentially, with your time and seeing the fuller picture. So if you're interested in that, please go to uncmp.com, click on there. It's completely free. You can dive in and hopefully extract all the value from that practice.
Wow. I just want to share one other lesson before I ask you on your points of friction, because another point which also feeds into that was also, it's not good enough to just show up. How the energy that you show up with matters. So whether it's how you show up with your kids and your wife, how you show up to work, how you show up to do anything, the energy, not necessarily like the physical energy, but the vibrational energy that you bring to the room, to the party, so to speak, matters. How you do something, the state that you do it in, obviously massively affects you, how you feel about doing it. But then also, if you're then interacting with another human, will affect them so much more than you kind of give it credit for. Like, most of us know when we're around loved ones, you can tell when something's off. You can tell when they're not quite present, when something's on their mind, when they're just off, that little bit off. And how different is that interaction on the flip side when they're present, when you can tell there's no weight on their shoulders from the day, when they're just happy to be here, like the banter's going back and forth, the conversation flows, and there's no inkling of something being wrong or them wanting to be somewhere else or anything. And so how I show up, not just for my family, but in other areas of life with that energy, was a huge realization for me. And then also, so taking that little bit of time before I do something, am I in the right state to get the best out of this, to give my best to the people that I'm here to kind of serve and interact with and ultimately love in that space? And then if I'm not, well, okay, what am I going to do about it so that I can show up as that version of me, which is the version I want to be, right?
The point is that whole thing of state is so important, because the level of creativity and genius that you're able to access when you're then doing these things, you can see beyond your problems. You're either going to stand there, look at this thing and be like, holy shit, this is a mountain in front of me. How am I going to get through this? Or it's like, wow, I'm going to go on this incredible journey, and I'm so excited to see what's going to happen along the different paths, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just excited and curious. If I were to sit and look at maybe some of my reflections on my end, we've got some similar themes, but I'm also trying to just share from a different perspective or different space. I think one of the things that I dropped the ball on massively this year was allocating time for myself. So one of the things that I teach every person that walks into my space is,
including me,
if there's a pyramid, it doesn't help that you're at the base of the pyramid versus you being at the top. And it's this whole principle of, you cannot give from an empty cup, give of your overflow. And if you're not prioritizing yourself, being full of yourself, not selfish, full of yourself, and selfish is good, looking after yourself, prioritizing meditation, whatever you need to do, your things that you need to do to love, care, and honor yourself, because you're the one here having your own fucking experience. I just wasn't doing that. My morning routine went to shit. And then it's like meetings, it's school run at like past 7, 7:45, and then it gets to like 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. Something will show up. I have to get this done. I found that it actually built a lot of resentment towards myself, but I obviously projected that outwards because I'm like, I'm doing all these different things. I'm not getting time for myself. And then you get into that cycle, and that whole cycle of suffering and woe is me. And I sat with that, and I was just, I really saw it. And even when I was in it, I would see it. And I'm like, it's so difficult to get out of this, because like I actually couldn't see a way out of how do I start prioritizing myself, because I'm needing to basically be mom and dad. Just to give a bit of context, we went for like 40-day process or protocol, which is essentially once you've given birth, you give your partner 40 days to heal and restore. And it's this whole practice where she doesn't have to essentially lift a finger, food's prepped, life is running, everything is good. So I was basically performing what she does and what I'm doing. Not as well, I might add. I was getting through it. But the point being is that mindset continued even before that and afterwards. And it was just a thing of, I got into such a bad habit with it. Not because you're trying to screw anyone over or screw yourself over. That's how life became. And things just really moved at a rapid pace. And I had to put the brakes on because I burnt out a couple of times this year. Lack of sleep. I didn't over caffeinate, so that's a big win. There was just this underlying fatigue. And then that mental chatter that you have, and you know this chatter is like, I'm tired. I just don't feel like doing this. I don't want to do it. I'm done. And then how you show up, the state, the presence, it's just not there. So everything starts to slowly decline. And my biggest hit was muscle mass, and just my body just took an absolute pounding. And I noticed I wasn't eating as consecutively. I went through like all these patterns that I had previously circumnavigated over the years. And it's like, wow, you're doing all this in one, and it's a slow burn and it chips away. And I just thought, as I was going through this, and when I really got the epiphany, it was just how many people are actually experiencing this slow decline in their quality of life, a slow decline in their presence, and they don't notice it because they are supporting this vision of success or consistency or caring for all these people. And essentially it's also like people pleasing, and it's a self-worth thing as well. Yeah. And it's just a thing of, well, when do you find the limit where you stop? And it's like your body's going to tell you, dude, you're not sleeping right, or you're losing weight, or you're cranky, or this. I notice all the little signs, and then it'll get louder and louder until the point where it's like, dude, you're done. You're finished. You need to stop. You need to slow down. When doing the basics just didn't work. I couldn't function and do those things. It was just a thing of, well, clearly something needs to change, something needs to give, and it can't be my body, because otherwise everything collapses. So
what was it that gave you that epiphany?
I think it was just, I said to myself, I think it was, when was it? It was early September. And I sat down, and I really caught myself in the cycle, and I said, like, okay, I need to sit down and I need to look at what are the destructive patterns, and really look at taking accountability with things that aren't working. So initially you start at the top level, things like what's not working in business, what's not working in your relationships, what's not working with, let's say, your parenting, what's not working with your physical, mental, and emotional health. What are the symptoms? And then like, what are the things that you're doing to achieve those outcomes? It was just like full audit of, oh goodness, I've done this pattern, I've done this thing, this is this. Oh, that's new. That's a nice way to validate why you're doing it, but that's bullshit. Calling myself out, and then like, how can we strip everything and come back to basics? So it was just the thing of assimilating those learnings and being like, well, I don't have to respond to clients immediately. I don't have to do that. I don't have to burn myself out creating content all the time, because I don't have an entire team doing that. I'm doing that from a space of creativity. And if I'm not enjoying it and there's no passion behind it, again, the intention, the state, the presence, none of the juicy stuff that actually gets people to be like, wow, that was really, really good. Well, that got me to think. None of it's behind the video. So now it's just regurgitating shit. It's like not even like from your belly. It needs to hold that weight and meaning. And you need to have assimilated that information. And just said, well, there's no weight within my actions or my words. So I'm going to rather wait for those moments when I feel recharged and replenished and it feels real and authentic to express. That's my rule. So there's my filter. Down to, look, I might not be able to get like 45-minute or hour-long workouts in with my current sleep regime. I'm happy with that. But I can go for 15, 20 minutes a day and just break up my body parts in a way that works for me. I've done this for how many years? And I will get my cardio in through doing a sport, let's say padel, or if I'm going for walks on the beach or whatever the case is, I'll find a way to integrate that in, and I can do that with my kids as well. So I started looking for things that I could do for myself and things that I could share, whilst learning to say yes to myself, which means I have to say no to a lot of other things. And it was that switch, and that was a slow process, down to like re-engaging with supplementation, practices we bring on for clients, saying you need to have a certain amount of water a day, you need to have electrolytes because most of us are low on sodium, etc., 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 etc. All these principles, and just being like, I need to build myself back up the same way that I would advise someone else to do it in their life and hold them accountable. Take your own medicine, bro. That's it. So it was really good just to like see it, like how when busyness happens, you can be living a busy mess. Versus
it's funny how no matter where you seem to get down the journey of personal of consciousness, of personal awareness, of personal growth, all that kind of stuff, you still experience the same things. We just find different ways to justify it, right? Different things to say of why it's acceptable, why it's okay, why whatever else we tell ourselves. Like, it's so interesting and I think when you were saying some of that it reminded me of some of the people at the gym. And so it makes me wonder if people actually recognize that their energy, mind, their mental health, all those things are slowly on the way down, and they just attribute it to things that are somewhat outside their control. The amount of people at the gym that have little niggles that they haven't gotten sorted out that they know they should. They've got little joint pains and they're just like, oh, I'm just over 40. I'm just old. And I'm like, dude, you're 40. At least you got 30 years left. Like, you're only just over the halfway mark. Like, not going to get any better from here with like that attitude. And it just blows my mind. Right. And so it's how many people do you think attribute some of those little things to, oh, it's what it's supposed to be running a business. Or you just don't have that spark after you've been together for 20 years. Or, you're not supposed to have a sex life or put yourself first or be able to make time for the gym when you've got kids, or these other things that we just slap on it and say like, it's just part of the thing. I just come last as the man and find some excuse.
Exactly. And it's those one-liner statements that are so highly chunked with all these different beliefs. And the funny thing is, if you call yourself out or you call someone else out on that, most people say, no, it's not the case. They won't put thought because it's just so deeply ingrained. And I think that's when the practices, once you've got these realizations, it's amazing, great, you can see it. But you taking a conscious action to change something that is so well patterned in your system, that takes effort, that takes consistency, that takes will and grit, because it's going to take a lot of presence to move the needle, and all it requires is choice. So thank God I have my own coach as well that calls me out on my BS, and it's just like, well, cool, this is what I saw. I was like, yeah. She was like, listen, Nick, this is where you're at, this is what you're doing, I can see that, but you're BSing yourself here, look here and here. And I was like, oh, I don't want to look there. I don't point the finger like that, that's not really kind. But thank goodness, because it was like, oh, I actually didn't see it that way. And sometimes just having another person verbalize or see it from their perspective and share that with you, you can be like, oh, it frees you from that patterned thought. And you can just, it's like you sip fresh air for the first time. Like, what is that what I'm actually doing?
Yeah.
And then you're like, wow, I can see the crazy. I can see this actually doesn't make any sense. Like, why would I approach it like this? That's not how I saw it. And then you can't unsee it. And that's when you can unravel in the most incredible ways. And it's amazing what can happen from that point with a bit of consistency and just persistence with that new shift in thought. But like you said, it's just, A lot of people, they have those big beliefs and they have that idea, and they're unwilling to address the niggle. And it's those niggles. The niggle isn't a bad thing. The niggle is basically your body or your mind or your emotions or your partner or your kid saying, hey, I'm reflecting something to you. Do you notice it? And it just gets louder. And maybe it has to be so loud where your wife leaves you or your kids want nothing to do with you, and you're just left with a nice fat bank balance, but no one to spend your time and money with. That we've heard that story how often. And then your body's at the wayside. It's not there because you didn't take care of it. You didn't notice it when you needed to. And now when you need it, it's not there. It's that whole dance of where focus goes, energy flows. And where focus goes, things grow. That's it.
Couldn't agree more, my friend. Like, that's so helpful, and especially when it comes to somebody else bringing up that stuff. If you can just shift, and I try to reframe this because it's so easy just to get into that frustration of someone else pointing out your own traits to you as well. But like shifting that to that point of gratitude, almost of I'm so grateful that I have someone to point out my own bullshit, so I don't get wrapped in my own head, and I have someone that is willing to be that niggle, right? Because imagine if you don't have that, or say it's your kid. Imagine they asked so many times. I had a call with a guy a few months ago, and he didn't end up signing up because he was still in his own way, but he wanted to be a better dad. And he kept saying, like, no, that he wouldn't go kick a footy with his son. And I was like, well, what's going to happen when he stops asking you? You're going to feel better that you don't have to say no because he's got to the point where he's completely given up asking because he just knows the answer is going to be no. How long do we want to wait before we then address that thing and don't have to get to that point? Because that would be pretty shit, personally, anyway.
Exactly. Because your kid's going to grow up. Yes, so there's a window for all these things. How many times must a person ask? Think about it like one of the big conversations that I think a lot of the men that come into this space, especially high performers, business owners, guys they've had kids, they've built up an incredible legacy, they've created impact in the world, but most of them have an issue in their relationship or relationships. Their wife has been that niggle. They call it nagging. They might refer to her as the old lady, but she's been there pointing out a lot of things and sometimes actually just asking more of you because she can see your potential. She's invested in you. And you're like, no, I'll dismiss that. Or I'll choose this over you. Or I will do this. Or I won't change this. Stop trying to change me. These are the type of narratives and conditioning and ideas. Well, your kids are like, I just want to spend 15, 20 minutes with you. No, I'm tired. Eventually, people just say, well, it seems like you want to go on life by yourself. We can live in the same house, but you can just do your own thing and we'll be the family on our own. So many times I've heard that story, seen that play out. And then the man feels isolated and it's like, how do I connect you? But you've been asked. It's not that it just didn't happen. Your wife didn't necessarily just sleep with someone else because they did it randomly. There were probably a lot of conversations or a lack of initiative from your side or a lot of rejection. And X, Y, and Z resulted because of that. They're not being a dick. They're looking for connection and you weren't giving that. So who's in the wrong here? And then it comes back to one of our core principles, which is ownership and accountability. I'd like to actually ask everyone here that's listening at this point in time. So hopefully you've been able to sit to this point in the podcast. And the first thing that I'd like to bring forth is a question around, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your overall alignment with the man that you aspired to be at the beginning of the year? So if you were a little bit more motivated and self-driven, most people have a New Year's resolution. Who did you picture yourself being? Who was that guy? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did you embody? 10 being you completely embodied that, you cleaned your goals, you're standing on top of your summit, you feel good, you feel nourished, you feel successful, you feel like you've got the needle moving. Obviously, anything less than that, there's still a lot of question marks on the table, and you actually didn't do that. So take a second and just think of that. And well, if you didn't even do that, well, goal setting is there for a reason. As you would know, Harry, we have goals, visions for purpose, especially as men. It's a really important component of how we function and move and navigate life.
And I think not a lot of us take time to reflect on shorter increments. Like most people wait till something, annually, like maybe it's a birthday, maybe it's the end of the year, something like that, to put some time into reflection to kind of see where they're at and get to the end of the year. Oh, I didn't hit that milestone again. Guess I'll set it for next year. Just carries over. But there's no plan. There's no way to measure it on smaller increments. And then there's no reflection at like shorter times to be able to see if we're on track or not. Like, I think that's one of the beautiful things about having, Sunday night or a Friday night, reflection, depending on, you like to have your reflection at the end of the work week or the full week, and see how'd you go? Because then it makes it a lot easier to course correct of, are we on track to those goals? And then so, okay, cool. This week, did I do the things that I believe would get me closer to that goal? If it's yes, awesome. Let's keep doing them a little bit longer. And then you do them a little bit longer, and then you can see, okay, are we getting closer to the goal? Do we have feedback to say that we're getting there? And then if it's a yes, awesome, keep doing the thing. But then it allows you to then be more specific is, okay, well, I've been doing the thing that I hypothesize will get me closer to the goal, but I'm not getting closer. So it's like, if your way to lose fat was, well, I'm not going to exercise, I'm just going to change my diet, or like the flip side. Okay, we're not going to change my diet. I'm just going to start doing 10,000 steps, whatever. You pick something random, and then you keep doing that. But then because your energy expenditure goes up, you start eating more, and because you're not worrying about your diet, your weight doesn't change. And it's like, okay, cool. My effort is not getting the result, so it's the input that needs to change. On the flip side, if you're trying to track those things and you're not doing the activity, then it doesn't matter what you said you would do. You haven't done anything. So it's the discipline and the execution of the task itself to get to the thing, right? So you can be a hell of a lot more specific as to like where the kink in the chain is to you getting from where you are to that end outcome. And I think that's why it's so valuable to have both a plan and B, a coach or a mentor to then hold you accountable and then to keep you along that track. Because if you're doing it on your own, then we get caught in our own emotional biases, and then we come up with all those justifications or excuses as to why this week it didn't happen, or where oh, it wasn't my fault, it was the market, or it was this, or it was that, or something outside of our control. And we spin that shit all the time, right? I always say to people, if there are people that can justify killing another human being over like jack shit, it's not going to be hard for you to justify why you didn't do the thing you said you would, right?
So easy to just get sucked into that trail of thought and validation. Your brain is wanting to close those loops. So it'll validate you all day. It wants you to put that to bed. And then you can just carry on doing what it's accustomed to doing. And why is it so difficult? Well, when you're needing to change your neurological structure, you're needing to be aware that the fact that your mind is going to have to put in a lot more effort. It's also going to want to stop you from applying that effort, because that's just a normal response. It's going to say, oh, don't do that. That's going to be strenuous. Oh, don't do that. And that's why it helps you also changing your environment, or having someone reflect a different environment and set of possibilities and perspectives. It's like, oh, that's why you can read a book. And it's like, wow, my life has completely changed because I see something different. It's night and day. So if you've not taken a second and wherever you are on that, I think then the next question would be, things that you did really well, what's worth carrying forward into this new year. So if you've got an idea of what the end version of you is going to look like now in 2025, what does that person look like? What do they feel like? What do they think like? Where are they standing? What do their relationships look like? How are they parenting? How are they connecting to their partner? How many close, dear friends do they invest time with? How have they invested in themselves and their body? How are they running their business or prioritizing their career? How are they caring for themselves? Like, what does that look like? Don't just now write now a list. Close your eyes and envision that. And if you're not clear on that, well, then sit a lot longer. Pause here and come back. Take a second. Like, plug in and get clear on what does your life look like at that point. If you had embodied now that version, what type of decisions do you think you made throughout the year to get there? And how different would your life look? How different would your relationship look if your wife felt connected, she felt that you were loving and you were doting on her, and your kids felt like, wow, I have a really present parent who also is a safe space and holds me accountable and really embodies that grounded masculinity that's healthy. And it's when you're stepping into being a present father and partner, or your business feels well led and things are moving, and the fact you're there holding the vision, everyone feels like, oh, I can trust this person. They're spearheading this movement and they're clear and they are certain within themselves, and I can trust that. We might not know what's happening in the market, but we can trust ourselves and one another moving forward. What does that guy look like? Sit within that. And if you're unsure about that, well, come up with an ideal. Look at someone that maybe you respect, maybe someone like Tony Robbins or Ray Dalio, or someone, let's say, like Kerwin Ray, who recently passed. Individuals that would stand out, and you can say, well, there's so many attributes and things that I can extract from here, and I wish I could embody that, or I'm having it reflected in my space, and I have the opportunity to embody that if I make different decisions. So start with that. And then once you've got that, look at what you're currently doing in alignment with that and bring that forward into 2025. So that's your next step.
Yeah. And a pro tip for a lot of guys out there, you probably don't need the thing that you think you do in order to embody that. I used to think I need to make that certain amount of money. I need to be hitting 8-9 figures to be able to have the time to spend with my kid, to be able to be that father, to be able to be that provider, to be able to do all these things. And there was like this huge barricade of like, well, I need to achieve this before I can be this type of father, before I can be this type of husband, before I can do all these things and be that type of man. That's not the case. It's the other way. It's the inverse. It's like you become that man who then is capable of achieving that level of success, being that father, being all those kind of things. Make life easier for yourself. Be that guy first and then see what happens.
That's exactly it. So spot on. And I think it's letting go of those BS excuses. So the next thing is, what do you need to let go of? What old habits, limiting beliefs, external things, as you mentioned there, external like points of, I have to achieve this, then I can do this. That's crap. You can be that, then you can do that. You don't do, then be. That's what the focus is here. What are the draining commitments that you're currently partaking in? The things that you've been unable to say no to. How connected do you feel with your partner? That's the person that you're choosing to do life with. It's not even about you anymore. Like, are you investing in them, helping them grow, supporting them and meeting their goals? Or are you actually just wasting their time? Because it's not just about you. Just heads up. So like really do some introspective work on where you're connecting, how you're connecting, and the choices that you're making with that. The last thing that I'd like you to just sit on would be reflect on your core values. These do change, by the way. What values that you had last year, you might have a couple carry over, but they could change in order of priority. And it's always a useful thing to look at on a year-to-year basis. Like, what are the values that I'm choosing to embody? Like, what does that look like in my life? How does that guy feel? Does that align with this vision that I've now set up for the person standing at their summit in 2025, come end of December? What are the values that they embody? How did they live by that?
I love that. Very worthwhile reflections, guys. So if you haven't actually, go back, slow it down. I suggest writing these actually down and give yourself some time. Like some time where you won't be distracted, where you can actually sit and go a little bit deeper on this. I think most people, when they talk about reflection, just say whatever comes to mind and just be able to tick it off as a box. But if you actually want to be able to change and learn from your own habits, learn from what has worked so you can do more of it, what hasn't worked so you can change it, then it's going to take a little bit more reflection, a little bit more deeper insight, as opposed to just the first thing that comes to my mind or just like, oh, I don't know, and then just brush it off, right? That's the kind of attitude of the guy that stays in the hamster wheel, plays the victim mindset. It's like, oh, why can't I change? Why can't I do anything different? It's like, well, have you looked at why what you're doing isn't working? And so we'll wrap it up there for this podcast. So guys, if you want to check out that time audit, you can head to our website. The link will be in the show notes today. You can download that, get access to that for absolutely free. I know that's helped me and a bunch of other guys to be able to prioritize this, see where it's being wasted, see where it can be maximized so that you've got that perfect balance of in the business, growing, your business, but also prioritizing your own health, filling your cup and giving back to obviously your kids, your partner, and everything else that you hold valuable in life as well. We've also got the decision matrix in there as well. So if you're struggling with making those decisions as to where you should be allocating your most valuable resources, then there's a matrix in there to help you systematically work through those decisions, so that if you're making those decisions, there's going to be sacrifices. You at least can make those sacrifices knowingly and then reevaluate as you go through that process. Again, the link to that will be in the show notes. So thanks for tuning in. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I'll see you guys in the new year. Bye.